I've been watching the show called Wednesday, and what I've noticed they've done so incredibly well is that as each season ends, there is a cliffhanger to already set up anticipation for the next season. And let me tell you, personally speaking, they have been quite effective. The suspense of needing to know what will happen next keeps me invested. But how do we replicate this type of curiosity into our lives and to our advantage? I'm so glad you asked. Welcome back to the It Girl Playbook. Today we will be exploring the power of suspense and curiosity. Let's start with understanding the psychology of it because in order to replicate anything, we first need to understand it. Suspense is effective in keeping people invested because our brain hates unfinished business. In psychology, this is called the Zeigarnik effect, which explains how when something is left incomplete, your brain stays hooked on it until you get the full picture or until it is complete. The origin was actually from a psychologist who noticed how waiters could remember complicated, unpaid orders with ease, but once the bill was paid, once it was settled, they quickly forgot about them. Which makes sense because if you think about your own life, there are so many different instances where once we complete something, whether it's a show, whether it's a task, whether it's a conversation, once we feel content, we move on to the next. And that is why cliffhangers, like the ones in the show I was watching, work so effectively. You never get that sense of satisfaction, and as a result, it keeps you invested. It creates a curiosity gap. This happens when we sense there's information we don't know yet, but we know it's just out of reach. It creates this tension in your brain, and the only way to relieve that tension is to seek the answer. If there is one person that has mastered this and has turned it into even a form of art, it's Taylor Swift. She plants Easter eggs in her lyrics, her music videos, even her outfits. Her fans would then spend weeks decoding these clues, sharing theories, and building excitement in that process long before an album actually drops. It's not just about the music anymore, it's about being part of the game and the mystery. She could have easily just announced it or post on her social media the new album drops, the new songs, or any updates, but what is the fun in that? And while you might not be dropping surprise albums, the psychology and the allure behind why suspense and curiosity works can still apply to everyday life, which brings us to our next section. How and why is this relevant to you? Because you may be wondering, well, I'm not an artist that is trying to get more streams, and I'm not creating a show that I'm trying to get more people to watch and love. And so, why exactly does this matter to you and to me? It's relevant because building suspense, curiosity, and mystery makes you magnetic, and that holds value in attracting opportunities, people, and influence in almost every area of your life, whether professionally, in relationships, and even friendships. Most people overshare, they over-explain and put everything out in the open, whether it's on social media, in dating, and maybe even in friendships. But that creates a problem when there's no mystery left because there's nothing left to discover. And discovery is what keeps people engaged. In the book, The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene, there are a few archetypes where mystery, curiosity, and suspense is essentially the core of what makes them extremely seductive. We have the siren. Their power lies in allure and pulling people in. They don't chase, they let curiosity do the work for them. The siren is mysterious, and that very sense of who is she, what is she about, that creates an atmosphere of both fascination and anticipation. Because they don't reveal much, there is that much more room to fantasize and discover. And then we have the coquette, who is a master of suspense, and they do this through withholding. They give a little, then pull back. They keep you guessing, wondering, waiting, and on your toes. The coquette thrives on creating anticipation and leaving you unsatisfied just enough to keep coming back for more. The author references these two archetypes as timelessly seductive, highlighting how charming and how powerful all of these qualities of mystery, suspense, and curiosity can actually be. And so whether you want to channel your inner siren, your inner coquette, or you feel like these archetypes naturally describe you, there is a lot of value in putting it into practice because because you're building up your seduction, and seduction is power. It forces people to lean in, to wonder, and invest attention and energy into you. And so not only does this attract people, opportunities to you, the curiosity keeps you alluring and magnetic because when everything isn't revealed up front, people can't stop thinking about what's left unsaid, which leads us to that saying that people throw around about how less is more. And in many cases, this cannot be more true. And one of the reasons why Apple became so successful so fast was because they capitalized on this. For example, when music players first became a thing, every other company at the time was advertising how much megabytes their MP3 music player had, the type of material they used, how compatible it was with other devices. They led with all the fancy tech jargon that they probably thought sounded impressive and therefore would impress someone. But all it did was confuse people who did not understand all the big fancy terminology. And so Apple came along and marketed their iPods with simply 1,000 songs in your pocket. And evidently, we can see how massive of a success that was, proving the point that when you confuse, you lose. And I feel like a lot of the times we do this to ourselves, right? When we're introducing ourselves, when we're marketing ourselves or something, we try to say more because we think that the more we say, the more chances we have to say something right and the more we can impress someone. Or we try to use big words, fancy terms to portray the image that we are sophisticated, we are educated, and we're smart. And so we do it out of ego, but it may not work as well in charming someone as effectively as simple, less, and direct. Because the beauty about less is that it leaves room for interpretation. I'm not trying to tell you to shrink yourself and to be less of yourself. It's more so to encourage you to be more intentional and therefore selective about the things you do share and who you choose to share it with. Because the beauty about saying less, doing less, keeping more to yourself is that when you do, it gives people the opportunity to fill in the blanks themselves, to interpret, justify, and/or project what you say or what you do in a way that fits their own perspective. This is good. We want that because it's like they are doing the work for you. They will explain it, justify it, and make sense of it on their own that fits their viewpoint to agree with you, aligning in your favor. I remember back in high school when I was walking down the streets and there was this psychic who I paid $5 to read my future. And she was very strategically vague in her readings, but it gave me the room to interpret it the way that I saw fit. Whether you choose to believe in psychics or not, that experience really taught me the power of being vague just enough and saying just enough to leave room for other people to interpret, because the way that people interpret things on their own will be far more effective than you personally explaining yourself. And so if there's one thing to take away, it's this: mystery, curiosity, and suspense can be incredibly powerful tools that you can use in your own life. When you stop oversharing and start holding just a little bit back, you naturally become more magnetic. People lean in, they wonder, they stay interested, they stay invested. You don't have to perform or be someone you're not. You already have value. Sometimes it's simply about not putting it all on the table at once. Let people discover you layer by layer. There's power in that, and quite honestly, it keeps the fun and the tension alive. That's it for today. I hope that this episode can encourage you to say a little less, hold a little back, and let curiosity, suspense, and mystery work in your favor. Be sure to check out the It Girl newsletter for episode recaps to join in on the conversation and to help decide on what to explore next. I hope to see you in our next episode, and in the meantime, as always, stay hot. Bye!